Hello, ladies and gentlemen. All right, hope you're feeling good out there today. What we're gonna do is continue on talking about consolidating our opening repertoire. So this series of videos is basically geared toward those who have jobs, families, school, um, and just generally busy people. Here is an example in the Sicilian defense, which takes place at the E4 C5, where you can use one line as black. So we are speaking from the black perspective today, where you can use one line as black to deal with two systems from white. The first system is the uh, C3 Sicilian, or Alpine Sicilian as some people call it, and the other system is the Mora Gambit, or Smith-Morra Gambit, which takes place after D4, C takes D4, and this move C3. What we're going to do is use one line from black to deal with both systems. Okay, learn this one line, and you don't have to have a separate, um, theoretical discussion ever again in this particular these particular variations. So first, we'll give a little background here. So with this Alpine Sicilian, or C3 Sicilian, this line is old as the earth itself, and the idea is very simple for white. White just wants to establish a very powerful center after the move D4. If you think about it, you will see this move often in the king pawn openings, Gioco Piano, right, where C3 is played, the Ponziani opening, C3, of course, the Ruy Lopez, where you see C3, all with um, the same goal in mind, is to establish the very powerful center, eventually restricting and pushing away black's pieces, and ultimately culminating in either a huge kingside attack or some type of end game advantage based on space. Of course, with every pawn move, there is some type of weakness or downside. Here, it is simply that the most natural square for the knight, which is C3, is taken away. And another feature in the position, and this is an important feature to understand about all E4 openings, is that the pawn on E4 is not protected, not defended. This is why some players actually go so far as to say that 1d4 is actually superior to 1e4, based on the fact that when d4 is played, the queen's pawn is protected by the queen in the opening, whereas the e pawn is not protected. And if you notice, most of black's defenses against the move 1e4 revolve around uh, this fact that this pawn is unprotected. Case in point, e4, knight f6, Alekhine defense, right? The attacking the e pawn. Now, we're not saying that the defense is good or bad, but just the fact that the idea is there. French defense, e4, e6, d4, d5, right? Attacking the e pawn that is unprotected. You get the picture, right? e4, c6, Caro-Kann, again, d4, d5, again. The question is constantly raised, what are you going to do about the e pawn? Same deal in the Petrovs, right? And we don't have to beat the horse anymore. So e4, c5, getting back to our discussion, we'll first look at this line with c3. So what black is going to do here normally is he usually plays d5, taking advantage of the fact that the c3 pawn is blocking access to that square by the knight. And so black has sort of an improved variation of the Scandinavian, if you want to look at it in that way, in that he can play d5, and after e takes d5, he does not have to worry about harassment of his queen by the move knight c3. And this is a respectable, well-known example of typical play for black and white in this line. Okay. And now we'll look briefly at the other line, the Smith-Morra. Right, there's Gambit, whereby black wants to, where white wants to give away a material in order to gain time, and open files, whereby he can use them to mount a massive attack against a black king, or cause cause black to make some concessions, whereby either white will get his material back, or black will just enter into a dreadful position, right, in trying to defend against white's activity. So many games you will see the gambit accepted, c3, d takes c3, knight takes c3, and again here's some typical play here where white can claim some compensation. His knight activity, brilliant piece placement, and black often has to be careful. Of course, there's other ways black can play. Black can, for example, you see it every now and then, he simply will push the pawn forward, d3, etc. All right, and I showed you those different lines because there are some of you out there that play the Sicilian, and against the move c3 you play one line, and against the move against the move 2c3 you play one line, and against the move 2d4 you play a different line. And I'm not judging, this is absolutely fine if you have the time, right? If you're a young child and right, you have school, and after school you want to spend 5-6 hours on chess, and you can do that, it's okay. But this video is geared to those that are busy, have busy schedules, and love chess, but they just don't have the time to study all of these separate lines. Okay, so the line I'm going to show you now is a line for black that is perfectly viable too. It's not a shady sideline where if your opponent knows what he's doing, he's going to get a big advantage and all of that. No, this is a respectable line that you can study and find many Grandmaster games on. And this line is going to help you defend as black against the Alapin system and the Morra Gambit. So let's get right into it. First, we'll look at this, the Alapin system. What you're going to play here is knight f6. Alright, knight f6. Exploiting the fact, as we discussed earlier, that the e-pawn is vulnerable. Now, this position has similarities to an Alekhine defense. But again, we could say it's an improved variation because with this pawn on c3, white's options are limited. Many times in the Alekhine, right after the move knight f6, instead of playing the most critical move e5, white often would like to play a move like knight c3 and try to steer the game into different channels. Of course, black can equalize, but again, we're trying to cut down on the amount of work we have to do. For instance, after e5, you can easily end up in a Vienna game. Again, no problem, but have you been studying the Vienna? Have you been looking at that opening? So it's all about getting to positions that we're familiar with and comfortable with. Back to our position. After e4, c5, c3, knight f6, we have this similarity with the Alekhine's defense. There's no adequate way that white can really defend that pawn without, if he chooses not to advance the pawn. He can't really defend the pawn, say with moves like d3, without just giving black an easy game. Okay, so e5 is critical. Knight d5 just as in Alekin's defense, and d4 is the main line. Now it's important, again, to attack the center immediately, just as you would in the French, Caro-Kann, Alekin's defense. All of these defenses where white is permitted to build up a center in the opening, you must be aggressive and take your chances against the center. The idea is not that white has done anything wrong by putting up a center. The center can putting pawns in the center is a great asset. The idea behind this is to understand that black's argument is that you're establishing your center prematurely and without adequate support. If white can support his center, then he's going to have a huge advantage. If he can support, solidify his center, he's going to have a huge advantage going forward, because the center is going to restrict the black pieces, all right, and it's going to give a lot of options to white. If he wants to attack on the queen side, excuse me, on the king side, if he wants to later on have a nice endgame where he has a lot of space. So it's critical that when you allow your opponent to place the pawns in the center, to have a plan to tear that center down. So this is the argument in these type of systems. White is saying, hey, I'm going to put this center up. White's going to neglect development, and he's going to say, it's no problem, I'm going to hide behind this big center, and then I'll fortify it, and then slowly squeeze you to death. Therefore, after d4, c takes d4 right away. C takes d4. d6. Okay, it doesn't stop. You just keep on fighting against the center. Knight f3. Here's white trying to fortify his center. Knight c6. Bishop c4. Attacking the piece. Knight b6. Bishop b5. Bishop b5 is already indicating the deep concern that white has for the vulnerability of the pawns in the center. It's already critical. And this is one of the main lines. Bishop b5, because white is saying I cannot maintain the center for too much longer. So he has to throw the pin on there, because moves, for instance, moves like bishop g4 is coming. So, for example, I'm sorry, let's take that back. Remember, this is attack right here. So let's just say bishop b3. Right? He doesn't want to, get off that diagonal. D takes e5. Knight takes e5. Knight takes e5. D takes e5. Queen d1. And black has absolutely no problems whatsoever. It's completely equalized. Play can continue with bishop d7, castle, rook c8, and again, there's nothing for black to worry about. So this is one of the reasons why the main line is bishop b5. All right, getting out of the threat, of course, of being captured, the bishop comes to b5 to put more pressure on black and indirectly defend his center. Of course, d takes e5, continuing the assault on the center. D takes e5. For example, right? This is not a good move. The same thing happens. Queen takes d1, king takes d1, bishop g4. And I wanted to show you that so you can see how the assault continues on the white center. Now the e-pawn is looking more like a liability, okay, than an asset. So instead of d takes e5, what is played in theory is knight takes e5. And then simply bishop d7, and now the move knight takes e5 is threatened by black, so play normally would continue. B takes c6, b takes c6, knight takes c6, and b takes c6. And this actually happened in the game Sveshnikov Walter Brown. I believe that was if I can remember correctly, 1980. Could be wrong. I'm going off my memory there. 1979. That's what it was. Novi Sad, 1979, and Brown had played e6. Now I remember, and basically both sides had a isolated pawn, perfectly equal. Even stronger than just playing e6 is putting the bishop, dark square bishop, on this diagonal right here. It's even stronger. Again, no worries for black. Okay, so now you might be asking, okay, that was the c3 Sicilian. What about the Smith-Morra? No problem. Let's get right to it. Here's the Smith-Morra. C takes, c3. Notice we had the same dynamic in the position, right? E pawn not protected, and pawn on c3, blocking the knight from coming out. So all you have to remember is that you're not going to take on c3, and that you want to leave that pawn there. Just think this way. You don't want to help white develop. Okay, you don't want to help him along with this plan at all. So here also you play the move knight f6. Again, giving giving white the same dilemma what to do with the e pawn. Okay. And again, e5. Okay. There's no real legitimate way to defend this pawn properly without black just being completely equal, just like in the Alekhine defense. Anytime white refrains on pushing the pawn to e5, black is a-okay. So again, knight d5, say c takes d5 for instance, you're right back where you started in the c3 Sicilian. Sometimes Morra players will play this move, knight f3 instead, because it's based on the fact that black can't capture here because the knight would be on prise. Okay, but you don't want to capture anyway if you're black. So here you would play moves like knight d6, knight c6, or just d6. Okay, so you're just going into the same the same line. You're just transposing. This, my friends, will just cut the amount of time and analysis, because now you just look at this one line. You find grandmaster games or classic games on this line, and you just learn the line, and you know that, okay, if I face the c3 Sicilian, I'm playing the same thing. If I play against the Morra, same thing. Let me give you a ridiculous example. If white tries to just not push, you just play a move like e5, and you just there's really nothing that white has to offer here. Black is better here. There's only one other move I really want to address here, and that's this move, right? Because it protects the pawn. Okay, and the queen comes out. So we can see right here that the most natural move is knight c6, and black is just completely equalized and has a chance of gaining initiative, becoming better. Actually, he already has a slight initiative after knight c6. And the idea here is, you might be saying, wait a minute, white has just captured the pawn. Remember, that pawn is a gambit pawn. Remember that by capturing, all white is doing is just basically evening up the material score. And this is one of the principles that you learn about gambits, is don't be afraid to give the material back at an appropriate time. Okay, and most players that play Smith-Morra anyway aren't going to play queen takes d4, because the whole idea of playing the gambit is that they might gain time for an attack. Alright, so for them to turn around and then capture with the queen and allow you to gain time for your pieces and go up in development, go ahead in development, as you can see on the board right here, is a psychological blow to any gambit player. No gambit player plays a gambit so that they can end up behind in development and under attack themselves. But nevertheless, I just wanted to show you that, since it is an option. So after, say, queen d4, knight c6, queen a4 is possible, and you go into these similar lines like the Scandinavian. It's like almost like a Scandinavian defense in reverse with the white pieces. You had the pawn on c3, of course, preventing these type of moves, but nevertheless, black is just fine here. Black can play e5. It's all kind of up to your personal preferences and taste at this point. Now you just gotta play chess here. You can even play d5. You know, even though this queen is pending right here, you can even play d5. That's how good this position is for black. You know, and of course, if e takes d5, you simply play queen takes d5 without fear of this knight coming out. Don't worry, I heard you out there. You're saying, hey, what about just e5? You know, the knight is pinned, blah, 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 blah. But you just played knight g4. Remember your general principles. The fact that white only has the queen developed, and then he's just moving this pawn again. So there must be some type of, you know, price to pay here. Right? So let's look at it real quick. Knight g4. Knight f3. Right? Defending again. And this is where you start bringing start bringing the heavy artillery out. Queen b6. Now what? Queen c2 is possible, but then this pawn will drop because the pin will be relinquished. So let's do knight d4. Why? Because it blocks the threat, but now this pawn is going to drop. You see? So queen takes d4 is dubious, basically. You know, it just gives black a good game. Alright, so again, the main continuation that you're going to see is this move e5. And there's nothing to worry about. Then you just transpose into the c3 Sicilian. So that is it. I hope that video has been helpful to you, and you know, good luck in your chess in the future. I look forward to your comments. You know, please subscribe, like, all that stuff. If you know, you can donate, you know, to the channel. It's a great help, and we look forward to making more videos in the future to help you, you know, improve in your game. All right, see you guys later.